Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, we've been studying the Mahācattārīsaka Sutta. This is Sutta number 117 in the Majjhima Nikaya. Okay, and last time I did the explanation of right view, the discourse on the Great 40. Just to review, it opens when the Buddha says he is going to teach the noble right concentration with its supports and its requisites. And it turns out that noble right concentration with its supports and its requisites is unification of mind. Unification of mind is concentration. This is one pointedness of mind. And it's equipped with the other 7 factors of the Noble Eightfold Path, from right view through right mindfulness. Then the Buddha undertakes an analysis and explanation of each of the first 5 path factors, beginning with right view. And he says right view comes first. And now he's going to explain each path factor in 3 ways. First, he'll explain that right view distinguishes between the wrong manifestation of the path factor and the right manifestation. Then, after explaining or analyzing what is the wrong manifestation of that path factor, or the wrong version, you might call it the wrong path factor, then he'll take the right path factor and distinguish it into 2 levels or 2 types. The mundane, which is here called the path factor that is connected with taints, or connected with the asavas, the influxes, partaking of merit, and ripening in the acquisitions. That means it leads on to future birth, aging, and death, but it leads to a wholesome or favorable or fortunate state of existence in the future. But it ripens in the acquisitions, and it leads to the acquiring, the picking up of a new set of 5 aggregates. And then, in contrast with this, is the supramundane right path factor. And this is described as the path factor that is noble, taintless, or free from the influxes, free from the asavas, supermundane, that is lokutara, a factor of the path, that is a factor of the supermundane or world-transcending path. And I said last time, this is my personal opinion, that the sutta seems to me to be a reworking of an older sutta in the light of a later development which was taking place perhaps later in the Buddha's lifetime, maybe several generations later, in which the teaching was becoming more refined, more systematized, and a particular system was starting to emerge out of the material in the early discourses. And one way in which this systematic presentation of the teaching is evident in the sutta is this distinction between the mundane path and the supramundane path. I think this is implicit in the early discourses, but that particular distinction is not made anywhere else except this one sutta. And according to my friend here, Venerable Naleo, the Chinese version of the sutta does not make the distinction of the mundane path and the supramundane path. And now there's another indication that this sutta there's another indication that this sutta bears the signs of systematization. And so I want to backtrack a little bit to the first path factor before I go on to the second. Well, last week I did the second, but I want to review the second factor also in the light of this observation. Okay, we have the supramundane right view explained as wisdom, faculty of wisdom, power of wisdom, investigation of states, enlightenment factor, the path factor of right view, in one whose mind is noble, whose mind is taintless, who possesses the noble path and is developing the noble path. This is the right view that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path. Okay, what is taking place here, I mentioned this last week, is that a number of terms which are more or less synonymous are being brought, but which occur elsewhere in the suttas in different contexts, are now being brought together as definitions of right view. They're all being shown as synonyms for right view. First, right view is defined explicitly as wisdom. And then once it's defined as wisdom, we have from the 5 faculties, the faculty of wisdom is brought in. From the 5 powers, the power of wisdom is brought in. Then we have 7 factors of enlightenment, the Dhamma Vicaya Sambojjhanga. That's the investigation of states, investigation of phenomena, enlightenment factor is brought in. And then they are all identified with the path factor of right view. Now on one level, it just seems that a number of roughly synonymous terms are being brought together. But underlying that procedure, there is a certain philosophical principle. There is a certain implicit philosophical principle, or principle of analysis. That underlying philosophical principle, and this is where we have the move taking place towards the Abhidhamma, is that these terms, these different expressions, are different names for a single mental factor functioning in different contexts in somewhat different ways. What is taking place here, I would say, is a step or a few steps in the direction of the analysis of mind that fully emerges in the Abhidhamma, where mind becomes analyzed into mind itself, which is called citta, operating in conjunction with a multitude, a number of mental factors, which are called chaitasikas. So this is in the Abhidhamma system. We have so in the Abhidhamma system, one has mind analyzed, well, let's say mentality, just to use a neutral term, analyzed into mind. This is citta, which has the function of knowing the object, being aware of an object. And then associated with the citta, joined with it, we have a multitude of these mental functions, which are called caitasikas. Some of them are certain functions common to all states of consciousness, to all states of mind, like feeling, perception, volition, attention. Then certain states or certain mental functions, certain caitasikas, are exclusively unwholesome. The three basic ones are greed, aversion, ignorance. Then there are many others: conceit, envy, laziness, restlessness, doubt, avarice, and so on and so forth. Then there are the wholesome, purely wholesome mental factors, such as generosity, wisdom, mindfulness, loving kindness, compassion. Okay, I think the sutta shows a stage in which this particular way of understanding the mind is starting to take shape. And so all of these different factors now, which in some way are related to wisdom, appearing under somewhat different names in different contexts, are all being brought together because they are all different, different names for basically the same mental factor, which is the factor of wisdom, the factor of understanding. It's a little bit like, use an example from everyday life. A mother says to the child, you should be diligent with your studies. You should apply energy to your studies. You should make an endeavor to study well. You should strive to do well in your studies. Okay, we have words endeavor, effort, striving. What else did I use? Endeavor to study well, strive to study well, make an effort to study well. Be energetic in your studies, energy. So these different words are all symbolizing, all representing the same mental quality, which we can call energy, effort, whatever. And so what takes place at a very ordinary level is also taking place in this particular way of viewing the mind. Different terms, different expressions are being seen as representing the operation of a single mental factor, which can be designated differently depending upon the context in which it is functioning. Okay, so we have wisdom is treated in that way. We have right view being analyzed in that way. Then we come to right intention, which I also dealt with last week. And where we have this explanation of right intention in paragraph 14, again we have a number of terms, roughly synonymous, being brought together. The thinking, thought, here we have thinking is taka, thought vitaka, intention sankappa, now some interesting ones, but it's called absorption. It's apana, and then mental fixity is vyapana, directing of mind, chetaso abhiniropana, mental formation, vachi sankhara. Again, these are terms that are taken to be synonymous, and the reason why they're taken to be synonymous is because they're understood to represent a single mental factor which can be spoken of in different ways. And that single mental factor also has somewhat different functions. On the one hand, it's responsible for thinking. On the other hand, or again, it is responsible for, we call it the intentional content of mental activity. On the other hand, or again, it is what fixes the mind upon an object. So it's called absorption or mental fixity. It's what directs the mind to the object. So it's called the directing of mind. And it is responsible for speech. It is what formulates thoughts in words, in verbal form. So it is called the verbal formation. Okay, now I will move on to right speech, or to speech, to the analysis of speech in paragraph 16. Again, we have this emphasis upon the importance of right view. Right view is the forerunner. Right view comes first. And right view comes first because one understands wrong speech is wrong speech and right speech is right speech. So through right view, one is able to discriminate what is wrong, what is right with respect to speech. Then one has, the question comes up, what is wrong speech? And we have this list of the 4 types of wrong speech. False speech or lying. Malicious speech. This could also be called divisive speech. Speech that is intended to divide people who are united, who are friends, who are on good terms. Harsh speech, angry speech, speech that hurts the feelings of others, and gossip or idle chatter. Okay, this is wrong speech. Okay, now we come to right speech. What is right speech? And right speech, again, is distinguished into 2 kinds. There is right speech that is connected with the taints, that partakes of merit, that ripens in the acquisition. In other words, that leads on to a new set of the 5 aggregates, to rebirth. So in this case, a favorable or fortunate state of rebirth. And then there is right speech that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path. the right speech that leads to liberation. Okay, now what is the right speech that is connected with the taints and so on? Abstinence from false speech, abstinence from malicious speech, abstinence from harsh speech, abstinence from gossip. This is right speech that is affected by the taint, connected with the taint, and so on. And now, the next paragraph, what is right speech that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path? Now we have a definition. The desisting from the four kinds of verbal misconduct. The abstaining, refraining, abstinence from them in one whose mind is noble, whose mind is taintless, who possesses the noble path and is developing the noble path. This is right speech that is noble, a factor of the path. So maybe some of you are asking, well, what is the difference? And I think without some understanding of what I call the systemization of the path, the way the distinction is drawn between the mundane path and the supramundane path, it seems like this is a difference without a distinction. Or is it a distinction without a difference? But once one understands the way the distinction is drawn, then one could see what is being intended. Okay, now the right speech that is affected by taints, in other words, the mundane right speech, these four types of abstinence, this is the abstinence that one undertakes through an act of will when one determines, first, I'm going to abstain from false speech, I'm going to abstain from malicious speech, I'm going to abstain from harsh speech, I'm going to abstain from gossip. So one makes this, one becomes acquainted with the Buddha's teaching, or in this case it could even be some other good ethical teaching, and one sees that it's beneficial to abstain from these types of wrong speech, and one makes the determination, I'm going to abstain from these types of wrong speech. And so that determination to abstain, this is one aspect of the right speech that partakes of merit. It's wholesome, meritorious, but still it's bound up with the round of existence. There might come occasions when one is tempted to break one's determination. Maybe you could see you're in some circumstance where you might be able to obtain some special advantage by just telling a little lie, or sometimes a big lie. And then you're tempted to speak, but then you think, I've made this determination to abstain from false speech. I'm going to abstain. And so then one applies that determination and one arouses that thought of abstinence. One brings that mental factor of abstinence into play, and one is then abstaining from false speech. That is that's part of right speech, partaking of merit. There might be an occasion when people are chatting and you see that there's a chance some people who are friendly and they're talking nasty ways about some people who are united, and you're tempted to cut in and speak your little bit of nasty gossip too in order to create further divisions between those friendly people who are on friendly terms. Suddenly you remember, I've made that resolution to abstain from malicious speech, and so you refrain from speaking in that way. Then you're abstaining from malicious speech. There might be an occasion when maybe your child, husband, friend, or just a stranger is doing something very nasty. You get very angry and you're tempted to speak harshly to that person. Then you remember, I've resolved to abstain from harsh speech, and so you refrain from speaking harshly. In that case, you're applying the abstinence from harsh speech. And then there are thousands of occasions when people are just sitting around chatting about sports matches, movie stars, rock stars, politics. Is that part of idle chatter? And you feel drawn into the chit-chat, then you remember, I've determined to refrain from idle chatter or gossip. And so you refrain. That's abstaining from idle chatter, the mundane type. So, what happens is that you make the resolution to abstain from each of the types of wrong speech with a separate resolution, and you apply that abstinence from wrong speech on different occasions whenever the opportunity arises for a moral transgression. And by applying that abstinence, then you are developing the quality of right speech of the mundane type, the type partaking of merit. Okay, now, in the understanding of the supramundane path, one is going on developing the mundane path as the path of insight. On that occasion, one is not engaging in speech, in action, or livelihood. So one is observing right speech, right action, right livelihood, just by the fact that one has already sort of purified one's speech, one's action, one's livelihood, just through one's previous abstinence from wrong speech, wrong action, wrong livelihood. And one is developing right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration, and applying the mind to understand the three characteristics of impermanence, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, anatta, non-self. When this path of insight reaches its culmination, then there takes place that occasion of the breakthrough to the Dhamma, that instantaneous, sudden breakthrough of realization, where one penetrates, sees the truth, the ultimate truth of the Dhamma. That is the supramundane path. And what happens on that occasion is that all 8 path factors arise as chaitasikas, as mental functions. They all arise and occur simultaneously. That experience of penetration to the Dhamma, the breakthrough to the Dhamma, I don't know if we have to go along with the one mind moment view. It could even be a series of mind moments. So in the Theravada.vn it becomes one mind moment. But leave aside the question whether it's one mind moment or a series of mind moments. But within those, the mind that experiences that breakthrough to the Dhamma the 8 path factors arise as mental functions, mental factors. Right view arises as the wisdom that understands the ultimate truth. Right intention, the second path factor, arises fixing the mind upon the ultimate truth. It is an experience in which the mind is completely fixed, directed upon the unconditioned, the ultimate truth, absorbed in it, fixed upon it, directed upon it. And on that occasion, right speech is also present as a desisting from simultaneously from these 4 types of verbal misconduct. Right action is present as a desisting simultaneously from the 3 kinds of bodily misconduct. Right livelihood is present as the desisting, the abstaining from wrong livelihood. And right effort will be present as the energy within that state of mind through which one understands or penetrates the truth of the Dhamma. And right mindfulness will be present as, you could say, the awareness, the attentiveness through which one is attending to, is aware of the truth of the Dhamma, is mindful of the truth of the Dhamma. And concentration is the unification of mind, the one-pointedness of mind. That occurs within that experience. That breakthrough experience is an experience of samadhi, of concentration, but it is an experience of samadhi in which panya, wisdom, prajna, is the dominant force, the dominant factor, rather than concentration itself. So the old suttas just speak about this experience which they call Dhamma Visamaya, the realization of the Dhamma, the breakthrough to the Dhamma, or Dhamma Chakku Patilabha, the gaining, the obtaining of the vision of Dhamma. But then the Buddhists, call them thinkers, analysts, began to examine what is actually taking place within that experience. And they wanted to connect this experience with all of the previous Buddhist ways of explaining the path under different terms. And one might bring up the question, if this is a momentary experience or a sudden experience, in what sense do we call it a path? A path seems to be something that one walks, figuratively, metaphorically, that one walks along, something one develops, something that one cultivates gradually. If it's sudden, how can we call it a path? And I think this is why the Abhidhammikas, or even the earlier generations of Buddhists, in quotation marks, thinkers, but these are more than thinkers, I don't know another term, sages, use the word path in relation to this experience. Because what is the essence of the Noble Eightfold Path. It is the way to the cessation of suffering. And from the earliest time, the way the Noble Eightfold Path brings the cessation of suffering is by eliminating the cause of suffering, by countering or uprooting the samudaya, the origin of suffering. And it is ultimately, it is that breakthrough experience that eradicates the kilesas, the defilements. The gradual path, the path that one develops in one's daily practice, building up step by step, builds up momentum. It weakens the defilements. It weakens ignorance. And it prepares the ground for the breakthrough to the supramundane path. And so that preliminary path is also a path. Of course, it leads on to the cessation of suffering. But that preliminary path does not itself eradicate the defilements. The eradication takes place through the breakthrough experience of the supramundane path. And it's in the mundane path, the preliminary path, one is strengthening the 8 factors. One is observing the 3 factors of virtue, of moral discipline, right speech, right action, right livelihood. Well, one begins with the right view, with the right intentions. One strengthens right, one observes right speech, right action, right livelihood. One applies right effort to the practice of right mindfulness in order to develop concentration, on the basis of which one cultivates the insight that will lead on to the supramundane path. Then when the supramundane path arises, then all of these 8 factors that have been gradually strengthened all come together simultaneously, all fully ripe, and they all empower the mind to break through the limits, the boundaries of mundane experience, and to realize the ultimate, the unconditioned, the deathless element, Nibbana. Okay, so coming back now to the Sutta, paragraph 21. One makes an effort to abandon wrong speech and to enter upon right speech. This is one's right effort. Mindfully one abandons wrong speech. Mindfully one enters upon and abides in, dwells in right speech. This is one's right mindfulness. Thus these 3 states run around and circle around right speech, that is right view, right effort, and right mindfulness. And so this is an important point actually. From a Buddhist perspective, we would have to say that the real, even right speech, right action, right livelihood, for them to be factors even of the, I would say, of the preliminary path, the mundane path, have to be accompanied by right view. And then of course they are undertaken through right effort and maintained, sustained by right mindfulness. People sometimes think that anybody who just leads an ethical life is observing right speech, right action, right livelihood, and so they're also following the Noble Eightfold Path. We have to say people who lead an ethical life can be still observing, we could say, a type of right speech, a type of right action, a type of right livelihood, but not the right speech, right action, right livelihood, even of the mundane Noble Eightfold Path. They're observing right speech, right action, right action of the 10 ways of wholesome action, which is not uniquely Buddhist, at least according to tradition, but it's supposed to be the 10 ways which are taught in the world by all wise teachers. So, at least according to Buddhist tradition, though I haven't seen them outside Buddhism itself. Maybe I'll ask now, at this point, if there are any questions. Okay, so several ones. Yeah. Yeah. No. Were you here last week? No, tell me, were you or not? But it doesn't matter. I'll answer the question, but I just want to know, because I did deal with that point last week. Okay, but I'll explain it anyway. But I'll explain it more briefly than I would if... No, I'll explain it very briefly. This is a point that I brought up as a rather curious and puzzling point, the use of that expression, anasava, which means without the asavas, without the taint. Because one would think that would mean that it's referring to the mind of an arhat, because it's only the arhat who is without taint, without the asavas. And this, in my view, shows that this sutta has been sort of reworked. It's an older sutta reworked at a somewhat later time when terms were being used with a special technical meaning. Now, in the technical sense of Abhidhamma, the expression taintless, without asavas, is applied to the 4 world-transcending, supramundane path experiences and the fruition of the fruits of those paths, which again, the fruits of those paths are considered to be momentary states of consciousness that follow immediately upon the attainment of the path. They occur in very rapid succession. So within this system, those states, even for a stream enterer Sotapanna still has the taint, but the path of stream entry and fruit of stream entry are classified technically as taintless. But when the stream enterer comes out of the path and fruit experience down to being an ordinary stream enterer, he'll still have the taint. The once returner will still have the taint. The non-returner will still have 2 of the 3 taints. Only the arhat is fully abandoned, fully eliminated all 3 taints. But I think, well, it's a puzzle. We don't exactly know. But I said last week, we don't exactly know why the expression taintless without asavas was used in relation to these paths and fruition experiences. Yeah. Not so, because within this way of understanding states of consciousness, the states of the jhanas are classified as with taints, tainted, with the asavas, with the influxes. The states of the formless attainments are considered to be tainted. Even though in the jhanas, in the formless attainments, there's no activity of the taints. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's your opinion. But it's right in to the extent that you expressed it very eloquently also. But what is distinctive about that path of stream entry experience is that it is the seeing, the first seeing of the truth of the Dhamma. And so for that reason it's called sometimes the path of seeing, Dasana Magga. And the emphasis is upon vision. We have these terms of vision, Dhamma Chakku, Patilabho, the arising of the Dhamma vision. He has seen the truth of the Dhamma, known the Dhamma. But it doesn't mean that at that moment only right view is present and none of the other past factors. Generally, in order for that right view to arise, first one has to have a foundation of the moral factors, the factors of morality, and there will have to be some foundation of effort, mindfulness, concentration. Yeah. One still has to continue to work. Any other questions? Okay, then let us go on to right action. Right action just follows very much the same pattern. Again, we have right view coming first, because one understands wrong action is wrong action, right action is right action. That is one's right view. What is wrong action? Again, the standard list: killing living beings, taking what is not given, and misconduct in sensual pleasures. And that's always explained as sexual misconduct. So that is wrong action. Right action is of two kinds. Again, the kind that is affected or connected with the taint, and the kind that is noble, taintless, supermundane, a factor of the path. What is the right action that is affected by the taints? The threefold right action: abstaining from killing living beings, abstinence from taking what is not given, abstinence from misconduct in sensual pleasures. So this is the abstinence that arises, when one understands first that these three types of actions are wrong, unwholesome, conducive to suffering for oneself and others. Then one makes the determination to abstain from them. One might take the precepts to abstain from these types of actions. One makes a strong resolution to abstain from them. That is the initial arising of the abstinence. Then there might be occasions when one is tempted to break the precepts, and there will arise that recollection of having made the resolution to abstain from these types of wrong actions, and that abstinence then becomes operative once again. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, I would say that mindfulness is what is coming into operation here. When one is, say, tempted to break one of the precepts, then one recollects, I have taken that precept. That is, we could say, a function of mindfulness. And then the energy that one applies in refraining from breaking the precept, that is the work of right effort. Okay, then the right action that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path, that is the right action that arises on the occasion of this. This is the way I interpret the sutta. That arises on the occasion when this supramundane, world-transcending path arises. And that has the function, or it manifests as the desisting simultaneously from the three kinds of bodily misconduct: abstaining, refraining, abstinence from them, in one whose mind is noble, whose mind is taintless, who possesses the noble path and is developing the noble path. That is right action, that is noble, a factor of the path. Then one makes an effort to abandon wrong action, to enter upon right action. That is one's right effort. That effort, and then mindfully one abandons wrong action. Mindfully one enters upon and dwells in right action. This is one's right mindfulness. So these three states run and circle around right action. That is right view, right effort, and right mindfulness. So on an occasion when one is developing the path, the mundane path, the path in everyday life, one has right view, so one understands what is wrong action, what is right action. Then whenever one comes into a situation where one might be tempted to follow the course of wrong action, but one determines not to follow it, and instead one adheres to the principles of right action, that is one's right effort. And mindfully, one is mindful in recollecting what is right action, what is wrong action, and with mindfulness one gives up the wrong action. Mindfulness, being mindful of what is wrong, what is right. Mindfully one adheres to right action. That is one's right mindfulness. So that is the way these work together in developing the preliminary path, the path of day-to-day, the noble path in one's day-to-day life. Then, when that breakthrough to the supramundane path takes place, then the right effort, right mindfulness are there, along with the right action, through which one is, through that supramundane right action, one is actually eradicating the tendencies towards wrong action, so that one can never enter upon wrong action again. Okay, then we come to livelihood. Okay, right view comes first. How does right view come first? One understands wrong livelihood is wrong livelihood, and right livelihood is right livelihood. That is one's right view. And what is wrong livelihood? Now here the Buddha is speaking to monks, so he's enumerating types of wrong livelihood that pertain to the monk's life, where these are methods by which monks get their means of living that are considered inappropriate. The means of living for the monk are the food, robes, dwelling places, medicinal requisites. These are explained at length in Visuddhimagga, in the first chapter of Visuddhimagga. Like scheming is like planning to get them. Talking is, I think, flattering people, lay people, in order to get them. Hinting is like hinting to people that one needs things. When people have not, if lay people want to present things to a monk, they will give what's called an invitation. They will say, if you need anything, please let me know, I'll be happy to offer it. Then it's considered quite in place to tell a layperson, I need such and such, and the layperson will provide it, and that's no problem. But this is going up to people who have not given any invitation, who have not shown themselves to be especially desirous of helping, and then just hinting that one needs certain things, that one places them in an uncomfortable position so they feel obliged to give. Belittling is belittling people who don't give things so that they'll feel to get obliged to give. Pursuing gain with gain, this is I think it's rejecting some gain of slight value so that people will think one is a great ascetic, very abstemious and simple in one's way of life, and then they'll come with more luxurious gifts in order to present to you. So these are types of wrong livelihood. Okay, then what is right livelihood? Right livelihood is twofold. Right livelihood that is affected by taints, partaking of merit, and so on. And the right livelihood that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path. Okay, the right livelihood that is affected by taints, and this is the standard definition of right livelihood that comes in most formulations of the Noble Eightfold Path. The noble disciple abandons wrong livelihood and gains his living by right livelihood. This is right livelihood that is affected by taints. And this is a definition that will be elaborated upon in numbers of discourses that the Buddha gives to lay disciples, in which he explains how one should earn one's living, what type of trades one should avoid, and what type of trades one should engage in. One finds these especially in the Anguttara Nikaya in the Book of Fours. Then there is right livelihood that is noble, taintless, supramundane, a factor of the path. Again, this is explained in the same way. Desisting from wrong livelihood, abstaining, refraining, abstinence from it, in one whose mind is noble, taintless, and so on, who is developing the noble path. Okay, and this is that factor, that mental factor of right livelihood that arises on the occasion of the supramundane path. And now this is another interesting point in the development of the way that teaching on the path factors came to be developed in the Abhidhamma system, is that these three factors, right speech, right action, right livelihood, came to be classified as three separate mental factors in the class of wholesome mental factors. So we have three chaitasikas. And whenever in one's day-to-day life one applies, one makes the effort to abstain from wrong speech, to abstain from wrong action, to abstain from wrong livelihood, or one makes the determination to observe right speech, to observe right action, to observe right livelihood, this is the activity the function of one or another of these three chaitasikas, three mental factors: right speech, right action, right livelihood. Then when the supramundane path arises, these three mental factors become three separate mental factors within the experience of the path. Three particular mental factors within those mental states that undergo that experience of breaking through to the truth of the Dhamma. Okay, and so the next paragraph is similar. One makes the effort to abandon wrong livelihood, to enter upon right livelihood. Mindfully one abandons wrong livelihood, mindfully one enters upon and dwells in right livelihood. That is one's right mindfulness. Thus these three states run and circle around right livelihood. That is right view, right effort, right mindfulness. Any questions about this? Not a super. Okay, mundane.
My little mundane question is, I think it seems to me opposite. Not doing alcoholic drugs, that's the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting question. This is my hypothesis. I don't know a definite explanation, but my hypothesis is that the principles of right action are concerned with fundamental morality or fundamental ethics. And so abstaining from killing, abstaining from from stealing, abstaining from sexual misconduct, those are principles of fundamental ethics. Now, taking alcoholic beverages or using intoxicating substances, that itself is not a violation of fundamental ethics. But the 5 precepts are not only concerned with fundamental ethics, but this is a practical code of morality. And so we have 4 principles included within the 5 precepts that derive from fundamental ethics. But now, taking alcoholic beverages is not a breach of fundamental ethics, but those who take alcoholic drinks lose their self-discipline and then become inclined to break the other 4 precepts. So as a practical measure, the Buddha, in order to sort of inculcate, to teach a practical code of moral discipline to people, the Buddha includes the principle of abstaining from alcoholic beverages within the code of 5 precepts. And when this is taught, if people undertake the 5 precepts, because they're abstaining from taking alcoholic beverages, then they'll maintain their mindfulness, their sense of hiri and ottappa, their conscientiousness and fear of consequences, and so they won't break the other 4 principles. Yeah. That's the way I understand it. It's not a versus, it's mundane and... Yeah. Eradication. Yeah. Exactly. not only suppress, it also eliminates by what the method of what I call it there? Eliminating in a particular respect. Perhaps you could include it more generally under suppress. And suppression here, it's not in Western society when it says we shouldn't suppress, always express. It's not suppress in the sense of forcefully repressing things, but not giving vent to unwholesome tendencies and trying to overcome them using various skillful techniques, skillful methods, and to weaken using methods to weaken them, to overcome them, so that they don't overpower the mind and overrun the mind. Yeah. 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 I think maybe I'll have to stop at this point. So I don't know how to get a whole class out of what lies ahead. Okay, we'll try to maybe explore the implications of this in a more detailed way next week. If I do finish this before the class is over next week, I think the next sutta on the list is the Satipatthana Sutta. Yeah. Okay, so let us share the merit. With the devas and nagas, other things. Akasata ca bhumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu sasanang. Akasata ca bhumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu desanam. Akasata ca bhumata deva naga mahitika punyantang anumoditva chirang rakantu mang parang. Etavata chaham mehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe deva anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavata chaham mehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etavata chaham hehi sampadang punya sampadang sabbe sata anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya.